Welcome to Y'all Ain't Right, a podcast about Mississippi politics with Robert Johnson and Brandon Jones. On today's show, a close U.S. Senate race, a preview of redistricting, a new development in the lawsuit over state Supreme Court lines, and another multi-million-dollar mistake by legislative leadership. Y'all Ain't Right is proudly sponsored by Chisholm Strategies, a leading direct voter contact firm rooted in the South with decades of experience helping campaigns from the courthouse to the White House reach, persuade, and mobilize voters. Robert, we're back at it.
Yeah, we're back at it. Week 2, we still have a huge host of things we can talk about.
What was the funniest bit of advice you got this week about our show?
Somebody said we ought to throw punches.
Okay.
Make it more exciting.
Well, stay tuned. we got plenty of ground to cover. I'm sure we can, work something up.
Yeah.
So listen, District Attorney Scott Colom raised nearly $1 million and outraised Republican Cindy Hyde-Smith in the second quarter. The last public polling in the race actually came from my shop, SPLC Action Fund. Our poll showed Colom trailing Hyde-Smith by just 3 points. Well, on the informed vote. So Hyde-Smith had 42%, Colom 39%, and independent candidate Ty Pinkins came in at 6%. Now, Robert, it's not just polling that suggests that this race could be close. Mississippi has had some of the closest statewide elections in the country over the last decade. In her first election to the Senate, Hyde-Smith defeated Mike Espy by just 65,000 votes. Then in 2019, Republican Tate Reeves defeated Democrat Jim Hood by just 5 points. That was about 45,000. And then in 23, we had a really close election. Democrat Brandon Presley came within 3 points of Tate Reeves, losing by only 26,000 votes. So Mississippi is no stranger to close races. Here we are heading into August. How do you see this race?
It's close. And the thing that bothers me is that the Ty Pinkins factor.
I was going to ask you about him. Is this a spoiler situation?
I don't think it's an orchestrated spoiler situation, but I think Ty is a little bit chafed about the support he got when he ran the last time. And a lot of it was born out of some people just didn't think it was the right time or he was the right candidate. And he took issue with that without thinking about the fact he just, burst on the scene. Nobody really knew him, hadn't known a lot about it. And a lot of people liked him. It's just that, hey, let's try to sit down and talk this thing out to see what would be the right thing to do. There's a little bit of bad blood. So, yeah, it's a spoiler, but I think it's a self-orchestrated spoiler. And it's a shame because there's a real chance.
Looking closely at the numbers, my observation was that a lot of Pinkins' support was actually surprisingly coming from Republicans. And I took that to mean people who wanted a third option, people who were planning to vote but didn't want to vote for their nominee, Hyde-Smith. 6% is pretty high for an independent candidate in Mississippi races. That actually is probably going to come down. Everybody I talk to who follows this stuff says that Mississippi just doesn't have any kind of history of successful independent candidates. It's going to be something to watch. I agree with that. It also kind of speaks to, doesn't it, people's misconception about what the party is supposed to do. His language about why he is an independent and why he left the Democratic Party has to do with them playing kingmaker or them kind of selecting someone other than him. The truth of the matter is, we don't have an organized political party. People are doing their best, but we don't have kingmakers. We don't have someone who can tell you not to run. We have open primary system. You can win if you win. And I think sometimes there's a misconception about what the party's role is in these things. I've not experienced, and this is going to sound maybe disingenuous for people who follow this stuff, I have not experienced in my lifetime the heavy hand of the party putting their thumb on a nominee, at least not in the way that had any real force behind it.
No, but the party should. That's the problem. You're talking about it like, that's just not what we do. No, that's what we should be doing. That has always been the problem. We got so many people. We end up with bad candidates or not so great candidates because they're all self-anointed. People, I'm going to run. That was the whole Ty Pinkins situation. Not hey, I want to talk to you. I'm thinking about running. It was like, I have served in the military, had a pretty good military career. I have a law degree from Georgetown. I'm a native Mississippian. I've done some community work. On paper, why shouldn't it be me? And look, we do that. You talk about all these close races, and I hope people don't take this the wrong way. But we've had good candidates, but we have not had great candidates. And they've been running against, in my opinion, bad Republican candidates. I mean, not bad, but Tate Reeves had high negative when he ran against Brandon Presley. And in fact, I had a steak dinner bet that he was going to get beat. Not because, and I like Brandon, not because Brandon was super great, but because I thought Tate Reeves was not a good candidate. I've never thought Tate Reeves was a good candidate, and he continues to win. And I think our biggest problem, we need a candidate that makes people want to come out and vote. Like, I got to get in this one. I've seen that happen. I saw it happen when Mike Espy ran for Congress the first time. It wasn't that Mike was super charismatic. It was a phenomenon. It was like, oh, my God, we have a smart, well-accomplished black man, black person running for Congress. We've never seen that. So everybody got excited.
I'm hearing a couple things. I mean, on the one hand, you're saying, yes, Pinkins is wrong that we don't have this strong-arm Democratic Party deciding who the nominees are, but it should.
Oh, we definitely should.
Yeah, actually, so that's funny. I just am not suggesting that he's not a sophisticated character at this point. He's run for Secretary of State. This was his second race for U.S. Senate, so he certainly knows something about running for office in Mississippi. I would just observe that this notion that he was somehow held out is not the case. And the party has never, well, that's his suggestion. Whenever he talks about why he decided not to be a Democrat, it was because he felt that he was held at arm's length, that party leaders prevented him from running. He mentions a certain number of people.
He may be right. That may have been the first time. Look, he ran for Senate, and it was not an impressive showing. And it wasn't because on paper he didn't do everything he's supposed to do. For the first time, somebody, the party leadership, got together and said, hey, you made a good run, and you did us a favor. You got on the ticket when we need a statewide candidate for Secretary of State, and you ran, and he did a great job. And he said, okay, I've done that. I've sacrificed. I've tried. Now, okay, get behind me. I'm going to run for Senate again. We're like, Cindy Hyde-Smith is a vulnerable candidate. We need to have a candidate that we think will give us the best shot. I didn't make that decision, but somebody did. You're right. We don't normally do that, but it's something we need to do more of.
Well, and I don't know that it happened here. I mean, my observation is I don't know that I believe that. And then the second part is, look, your party doesn't have a lot of money that it gives to these candidates anyway. So these candidates are self-sustaining operations. I mean, the extent to which you have a good campaign in Mississippi is not because the Democratic Party came in and poured a lot of money on you as the nominee. The nominees who do well, and I would say those last three that I mentioned did really well, they did it because they had their own fundraising apparatus. Yeah. They put their own campaign together. Each of those people, Espy, when he competed against Hyde-Smith, Jim Hood, when he ran against Reeves the first time, and then Brandon Presley, they all put together impressive campaign finance operations and did it themselves without a whole lot of help.
But look at who these people were. All of them had been elected before. All of them had run successful campaigns where they had won, whether it be regional, congressional, or statewide. They had all done that.
Yeah.
The problem with Pinkins is out of the blue, out of nowhere, has never run for anything. He runs for a U.S. Senate. Yeah. And there were people who said, hey, it may serve you better if you got elected to something. I never had that conversation with him. This is what I've heard was said to him. If you run for something, you took a shot at the moon, it didn't work. You got your name out there, you ran for Secretary of State, that didn't work. You're from Rolling Fork. They need a lot of help over there. What about running for state senate over there, or state house of representatives, or something? It doesn't have to be
kind of take an incremental.
Yeah, I mean, only because it just didn't seem to work as well the first couple of times you ran. So, but the people you talk about, they could go to a fundraiser in New York or D.C. with high-ranking Democratic donors and say, look, get behind me. Look at what I've done. You could do that. You can't do that with Pinkins. And to a certain extent, you can do it with Colom. He's been a DA. You know, a DA is a stepping stone for a lot of.
Well, and he's proving. He's proving that he steps into that tradition because he's having successful fundraising and he's doing a lot of it in state. He's doing a lot of it, out of state, but his fundraising numbers in state are pretty impressive. And look, I would say this too. There's three people we've mentioned, Espy, Hood, Presley. In my mind, they were all impressive candidates. They were all better than the person they were up against. Yep. And if you look, it all got closer. It all got close. And that's why we tell people, we're on the cusp of something big here, because if you just don't take our word for it, just look at the math. We had a 60,000 vote margin the first time that Hyde-Smith ran. The last election was down to 25,000. It's narrowing. I think the opportunity's there. And let's go back to Pinkins. Yes, there's a spoiler opportunity here. I mean, I have confidence in the voters. I have confidence in the voters understanding what's going on, and I actually don't think he's going to play a spoiler role in this race. He's welcome to run. I mean, for all that we've said, we can't keep people from running.
No,
if
we
he
can't
wants to
keep
run, he
running.
can do it. But I think at the end of the day, people are going to know the score. And if they want a different senator, they're going to have to choose Colom.
I just wish Ty Pinkins was running for something else because he's a well-accomplished young man. I think he could do a great deal of good in elected office in the state of Mississippi, and I hope he stays involved. I just wish he wasn't running in this race. It makes it that much more difficult. But I got confidence in the voters, too. They understand how things work. And let me tell you, I know Democrats who have switched to the independent party who were elected all the time, but the minute they switched to independence, they were done. So it's hard. It's hard in Mississippi.
It is hard. There are a few examples of independent mayors, but it's a pretty tough road to hoe. And look, let's say this, just to be fair. The brand for the Republican Party nationally is down. Donald Trump is in the 30s. They're taking on water. This is in all likelihood going to be a pretty successful run of elections for Democrats in November, just by virtue of how bad the chief executive is and how unpopular he is.
Especially for somebody like Cindy Hyde-Smith, because the only thing she ever runs on is MAGA or Trump. That's all she does. That's all she talks about. That's it.
The whole thing. I mean, it's not accomplishment for sure.
And that's a negative right now, in my opinion.
I think so.
Even in the state of Mississippi, he's still a popular Republican, but his numbers are down.
Yeah, he's still popular here, but there's some gaps there. But the other part of this that we have to acknowledge is, unfortunately, the Democratic Party brand is down as well. The party leadership and our political class has not been the greatest, and so they've had a hard time taking advantage of some of these moments where they could have been more successful. That's why you kind of have to cut a little bit of an independent streak whenever you're running for these races and not marry yourself too closely to either brand. I think
I understand Pinkins. I understand Pinkins' frustration. Also, you're spot on about the Democratic Party. The problem with Democrats that the Republicans don't have is that we are a big tent party. And I still think you can be a big tent party and be more, and you can narrow your message better than we have. This all over the place, I'm the leader for everybody kind of thing. You got to pick some issues. You got to pick some things that you prioritize and stick with them. It's easier in the state of Mississippi than it is nationally to do that because Democrats by nature, a little bit more conservative here. You can narrow that message. We just don't do a good job of doing it.
Look, I've always heard it said, Republicans fall in line, Democrats fall in love. And there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, if you've ever been to an organizing party for Republicans in the state of Mississippi, it's a pretty orderly affair. And at the end of the day, whatever the decision that is made, that's the decision that is made, and they carry it out.
Yeah.
That is not the way our people work.
Let me tell you how bad we are. And this is, I love Brandon Presley, but the most frustrating thing I had during that campaign was he kept working on Republicans for Presley. When have you ever heard Republicans say, what do you have Tate Reeves say, Democrat for Reeves? They don't give a damn about Democrats voting. I don't know what it is about our base that we don't want to pour all of our energy into our base. We keep trying to get other people to come. No.
There's a romantic notion that we're going to convince a critical mass of white Republicans in the state of Mississippi to flip these.
It's not going to happen.
And that's probably not going to happen.
No, you can convince them that you're right on a lot of issues. Let me tell you what you can't convince them to. They won't vote for you. Yeah. They'll tell you. I've been in conversations, and I can tell you, I can talk about issues, and they can agree. You're 100% right about that. I can't vote for it.
I wonder why that is. I wonder what that has to do with.
Well, I got some notions, but maybe we'll say that for another show.
Let's get into redistricting. On April 29th, the U.S. Supreme Court issued its opinion in Louisiana versus Callais, effectively taking away what was left of the Voting Rights Act. Court said voters no longer need court protection to ensure that politicians consider race when drawing political boundaries. Politicians in state legislatures are now free, basically, Robert, to eliminate black majority districts. This decision has already changed congressional maps across the South. We will likely see changes to legislative maps, court maps, and local maps here in Mississippi. So just before the opinion came down, Governor Tate Reeves called a special session to redraw Supreme Court districts. We'll talk about those in a minute. But on May 13th, he changed his mind and canceled the special session. I wanted to mention that because in his announcement canceling the session, he said, quote, the tenure of Congressman Benny Thompson reigning terror on the 2nd Congressional District is over. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Now, he has continued to say provocative things, as is increasingly his nature. But at the Neshoba County Fair, both Jason White and Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann said they expect redistricting to occur during the regular session in 27, or at least closer to January. Okay, I've dropped a lot there, Robert. You're going to be one of the main people dealing with this here in about 5 or 6 months, I guess. What do you think that process is going to look like, or what, if any, of what I just said elicited some response out of you?
I'm just sitting here. I'm like, okay, let's see what you got. I mean, we have done redistricting. We fought with these same people on redistricting. You know what our fight was about? Hey, I know the Voting Rights Act said we maximize African-American voting strength. We got enough. Can we spread this out a little bit? There may be opportunities for Democrats who are not African-Americans to be elected somewhere. And Republicans said no.
You've been a voice, and just let's bring people up to speed on what that means, because what you call that is opportunity districts. You've been a voice for creating districts that were, there was more parity within race.
Absolutely.
Like, so that you would have, like, let's say 40% black members, so that it wasn't like 92 to 8% one way or the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's important about that is, I mean, think about a person, African-American, who's elected to office running a district that's 70% African-American. So all he does is talking about African-Americans, and this is what we're going to do, and pull on people's heartstrings about issues that have more to do with race or issues that are more local. But if you have opportunity districts, I make the argument in opportunity districts say that 40% of the population is African-American. That candidate has to have that African-American vote. He has to have that other 60% too. He or she have to talk about real issues. Can't be any of this, it's good to see brother and sister over here, or I'm a missionary Baptist, or I go to church over. It won't be any of that. Every time there's an opportunity district, people have to work and talk about real issues. And it's true with Republicans, too.
You have to talk to everybody.
You got to talk to everybody.
You don't have the luxury of just dismissing a large segment of your voter base. You and then you have to be responsive to them once you get elected.
It's not enough just to be a Democrat. You got to deal with real issues. And I say that from experience. The first time I ran for Senate, it was a less than 56% district, which was, in most people's minds, if you're African-American, in 1992, you're not supposed to be able to win that district, especially against a sitting white Democrat. But I knew that I had to talk about issues. I had to be well-versed in issues. It wasn't enough just to be black. It wasn't enough just to be a Democrat. People wanted to see that you knew what you were doing. And that's the way we ought to have people running all the time. We ought to run on issues. Be a Democrat. Lean towards the issues that you think are important, because I think we support the right issues for working people. But it has created a class of elected officials that are just lazy. Nobody does the work.
Well, that's one of the things that happens, this type of gerrymandering. And I was going to point out, we're now 2 cycles deep into that, because we've already had 2 situations where Republicans controlled the redistricting process. So we've seen our legislature go from a narrow Democratic majority to a narrow Republican majority to a Republican supermajority. That was all done by the pen. That wasn't done.
That was all done by the pen.
That wasn't done by winning competitive races.
No.
It was done by drawing your way out of it.
Drawing your way out of it, and it was done by Republican leadership. But the formula originated with white Democrats.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean,
the state's history, the
Democratic Party
is control for white.
Yeah, this is what we're going to draw this because this is how we want to get elected.
And so now we have a state that is touching a population of 40% black voters, which is the largest in the country.
Yes.
And we have a Republican leadership who is talking about annihilating black leadership in Congress. Well, so this is what I wanted to get at, because what I'm concerned about is that they're going to manipulate the map to make even fewer competitive races. But what you have told me, and what I hear you saying today, is they've got a math problem, because with 40% black voting age population, these people have to go somewhere.
They got to go somewhere.
And you've already gerrymandered twice, so you've already packed these districts 2 times.
You have a supermajority in the House and the Senate.
I guess they want a super.
Every statewide elected official is a Republican. Every statewide elected official is white. What are you going to do? All this blustering, we got to get rid of Benny Thompson. The people the first letters that were sent to the legislature when they were talking about redistricting were from Michael Guest, Kelly, and who's the guy on the coast?
Yeah, Mike Lee. Gosh.
Well, the guy that does nothing, the sheriff that does nothing.
I know him personally. Mike Ezel.
Mike Ezel, yeah. Look,
gosh.
These guys stood up and said, hey, leave Benny Thompson alone. Because if you mess with Benny Thompson, you're going to mess with me. Benny Thompson asked them not to give him any more people. My district is big enough. And they gave him Adams County, Wilson County, Amite County. They just loaded him up with more African Americans. White Democrats in Natchez said, please help us keep Michael Guest. I said, why? He has done nothing for the 3rd Congressional District. I mean, he's nice. He's a nice enough guy, but he just votes along party lines, whether it hurts you or not.
So you're pointing to the fact that this is going to be complicated, not simply because they've already gerrymandered twice and they've already done it about as good as they can do it, but they're also dealing with their own people who are saying, well, if you do this, you're going to mess my people up. You're going to mess my numbers up. Because I think what the suggestion here is that if you do take away District 2 as it currently exists, those black voters have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So could they go to District 1? You know, that's where Kelly is.
Yeah.
Do they go to District 3 where Guest is?
Some of them.
And Kelly and Guest are both saying, I don't need it more competitive. In fact, you know, Guest almost lost his primary 2 years ago.
Guest is probably the most vulnerable out of all of them, but all of them would be negatively, in their opinion, affected if you did that. And then if you did it, you wouldn't, I don't think you could do it. You can do enough of that to make that district, it still would be majority African American.
Yeah.
It'll be majority Democrat. And I still think Benny Thompson would get elected. But you would end up creating an opportunity district for somebody else out of those 4 districts. But look, hey, you mentioned the governor. The governor didn't pull back on doing the Supreme Court districts because it was the right thing to do. They did the same thing. The Supreme Court justices, they came to him saying the same thing. Hey, you just leave that alone right now, okay? We're all okay.
So there's
black people and Democrats have to go somewhere.
Yeah, they're going to have some challenges. So we've talked about Congress. The lieutenant governor and the speaker have both intimated that when they reconvene, they are going to take a look at the Supreme Court. They are going to look at the Court of Appeals. They are going to look at the legislature. So I suspect that when you go back in, you're going to be dealing with a whole variety of redistricting, not just Congress.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and they said, well, they can do something. Yeah, you can draw districts that look like a pencil. You can draw them that look like a worm. You can do all kinds of weird drawings and eliminate some African-American elected officials. You may be able to create a district where it's so tight that Benny Thompson may not be able to get, but they would be so incongruous. I mean, they would make no sense geographically, demographically. All these things still matter in redistricting. They still have to be done that makes some sense. And so the question is, can you do what you're thinking about doing without creating another set of litigation that we haven't litigated yet? And it may not have anything to do with race or anything. It just may have to do with just practicality.
Yeah, just other map drawing techniques and things. So you said something, though, that I think we can kind of bring that back into the conversation. What has happened to Mississippi as it has gotten more and more gerrymandered? Well, what has happened is our elected representation has become poorer. They have become less, we're not getting great ideas. We're getting more extremist. We're getting people who are not doing the things you're talking about by like connecting themselves to different parts of the community, trying to fashion answers that are good for everybody. They're extremists. That's what happens.
Let me tell you.
And the more that we develop these kind of insane districts that are so incredibly non-competitive, it's not the cream that rises to the top. You get your lowest common denominator.
I'm not going to call his name because he's embarrassed that he said this, but a former state senator said on a conservative talk show when somebody suggested that maybe you need to add this area to your district and you could, inform people about, no, I don't want those people, because those people would, he essentially said, I don't want people who will ask what I'm doing. I want people to just do that don't care. Don't give me people who care. He essentially was saying I could just walk around, do whatever the hell I want to do because these people like me because they're from that area. But if you add people that I actually have to go talk to, actually have to explain things to, or something of that nature, they won't vote for me.
Yeah.
And goes back to your point. You just end up with people who said, this is where I'm from. I grew up with you all, and I'll figure it out. One of the things I tell young elected officials, they always come in and say, well, I just got elected and I'm learning. Hell, you weren't saying that when you were running. Don't ever say you're coming in because you're learning. Come in and be masterful. Come in and do the work. You won't know as much as I know because I've been here a long time, but you can be just as effective because you have to read more. You have to pay attention more. You have to do that. We don't have people doing enough of that.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things, and it's not a Mississippi issue.
No.
The more that you have politicians picking their voters rather than voters picking the people who represent them, it's a mess. And we've
You mean
talked about it.
politicians picking themselves? I'll go back to this point. Somebody wrote me today and say, are you all doing anything to get candidates? And I really couldn't answer that question. We really should be having interviews, sitting down saying, you'll be the right one. This is who we're behind. When I ran the first time, we had community caucuses, because this was the first time we were having African Americans run for a lot of seats. And the people had the wherewithal to say, you know what we need to do? Let's have community meetings and let these people, let us pick our candidate, because they thought it was important that we have one candidate that we pick, because we were running against a Democrat. And they wanted not 5 new people running against an incumbent. They wanted to pick the right candidate.
So
it was a wonderful
process.
What's that?
Like you had a vetting process.
Yes. And I mean, it would be in churches every 2 weeks or so during this process, or community centers. And there would be 200 to 300 people. We hadn't seen that since, lined up. Yeah. We took buses to these meetings. And that we don't do anything. I
know some of your people. It's an underrated part of operation and organization in Adams County. It's some good people that can.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about this more, because you're going to be dealing with redistricting. Yeah. You're going to be dealing with a lot of different forms of it. We also are going to continue to talk about the quality of candidates, not just for the Republicans, but for Democrats as well, and what that process looks like. And
let me just say one more thing, because I don't want to make light of the redistricting process. I think it will be very difficult for the Republican leadership to do what they profess to do publicly. Get rid of Benny Thompson, get rid of Democrats. I think it'll be extremely difficult for them to do that. But there are things they can do. I think they firmly are committed to reversing those 3 seats that we got under the court ruling, Judge Aycott.
Yeah, in the Senate.
In the Senate,
right.
Those seats in the Senate and the 1 House district. I think that will definitely happen. They're going to redraw those lines. At the very least, take them back to the way they were in 2022.
Well, and we're talking about an undoing of the crown jewel of the civil rights movement. If not for the Voting Rights Act, you would not have seen either black representation in the South or representation that listened to the needs of black people. And so we're talking about a seismic shift that reverses what was an incredibly positive federal movement in a state like ours. So you're right. There's a serious side to all this.
It got bastardized into Republicans laying out, or just leadership, and I keep saying this, white leadership, Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter, laying out a little carrot saying, look, you can have 75% African-American and black people jumping on it and taking it. And these 3 districts that Judge Aycott created or ordered to be redrawn, I don't think any of those districts was 55% African-American. I don't think that number ever got reached in any of those districts. Those people ran in districts where there was a 2 to 3% margin and won convincingly. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm probably going to piss people off that I served with, those 3 people that got it, Johnny Dupree, Senator Isom, and Justin Crosby, are high-quality candidates. These people work. They are better than a lot of people we've gotten elected who are serving right now. And I think when you get opportunity districts, when you get districts that are competitive, where you have to talk to everybody, you get better candidates.
It gives you your best candidate, 100%. So there's another piece to this. Last week, we found out that a federal judge has reopened the case over Mississippi Supreme Court districts. She issued an order asking the black voters, who were the plaintiffs, who had previously prevailed in their lawsuit, to provide something the law didn't require the first time, but now that we've got Callais, it's not enough to simply show that there was a discriminatory outcome. Now you have to show intent. So she's going back to the parties, reopened discovery, and asked for that. This is Judge Sharon Aycock, U.S. District Court for the Northern District. So she had already ruled that Mississippi's 3 Supreme Court districts, which, by the way, unchanged since 1987. We hadn't touched them since 87, diluted black voting stream in violation of the Voting Rights Act. So now with Callais, we're kind of in a post-Voting Rights Act environment. The plaintiffs are being asked to show discriminatory intent. Are the plaintiffs going to be able to show discriminatory intent? And if they can, I'm curious to know what happens next. So let's say they successfully clear that hurdle. And I know you don't know the answer to this, but I'm just in this post-Calais environment, I'm thinking through what these lawsuits are going to look like. Let's say they are able to. What happens next? So will they? And then if they can, what next?
I don't know how they're going to show intent. I mean, maybe there's some writings out there. Maybe there's some testimony in hearings on redistricting where people said certain things. But
because you've heard some people say crazy things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You've heard racist statements from the floor of the House.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah.
I'm laughing at you because of your expression, but I mean, yeah, this is not, I mean, so that would be where their evidence would come from.
That's
would be from the record, from someone saying, I'm doing this for this reason. Other places where politicians say things about their intent.
Look, I'm an eternal optimist. I'm kind of trying to find the silver lining in all this. I think we have a unique opportunity in the state of Mississippi because we're 40% African American. I think it will force people to stop creating as much separation. That's what my hope is. Yeah, because they can't have it the way they want to, and they can't talk about things in the way they want to talk about them. And it will force people to the table to talk about issues that are really important. But can they show intent? I think they'll have to go back to, as you talked about, especially now that we're having our sessions recorded. You can go back to YouTube. There's a record of things people have said. I was a witness in a lawsuit on the Jackson Airport, and there was a speech I gave on the floor of the House 10 years ago that I didn't know that it was recorded. But yeah, we've been recording it that long. So there's a wealth of information out there that can be used. But again, laying out these legal parameters that Callais has established, I think it'll have a great impact in places like North Carolina and Georgia, marginal southern states that have a significant African-American population, but nobody has a population the state of Mississippi has. I think we're going to see change in a way that other people don't.
So you think it's a bigger challenge for them?
Absolutely.
Here.
Yes.
Because we've already seen in Tennessee, in Louisiana, in Georgia, in Alabama, we've already seen them change the face of their congressional districts in some of these places.
But all of them are, you know,
it's a smaller,
low
black
30s.
population.
They don't have the numbers that we have. And I don't know that the numbers they have are concentrated the way ours are. I think 70%, I think that's the number, 70% of the state of Mississippi African-American population lives west of I-55 along the river in the Delta area. Okay. And so that's Benny Thompson's 2nd Congressional District. Where do you take those people? They're concentrated. Well, and if they were to be successful, speaking of the case, I was just thinking this through. Wouldn't at that point the judge issue an order basically asking it would be kind of the same outcome, because you would just basically enter an order saying, okay, you still have to redraw the lines subject to this order. Right. So I don't know that you end up in a different place. I don't know that you do. This is all the stuff we're going to be figuring out, you know, as we go. But I was thinking about it. I was like, well, if the plaintiffs can successfully show discriminatory intent, which I'm not going to be surprised if they do. We know it was there, frankly. So let's just see what they can show. If they're able to show that there was racial discrimination, she's probably just going to have to issue an order saying, okay, legislature, you got to draw it consistent with the new rules. So we're kind of, I don't know, practically speaking, I just wondered, are we in a different spot? Well, I think it can cut both ways. The problem in Mississippi is that what has been sort of what's good for us is that 90 to 95% of the African-American population are Democrats. Yeah. And so when somebody says, this is not about race, it's about party. But 95% of the Democrats. Yeah, we've become so stratified in the way that we vote that it's almost synonymous. And look, let's be honest, the Southern strategy, and certainly I can think of many modern Republicans, including some who want to be governor, who really wanted to put a black face on the Democratic Party. They knew that was successful. Really wanted to. That's what they do. Yeah, that's exactly what they did. And that's what their redistricting efforts were. And so the first people to get cut out of the legislature whenever they were redrawing the lines were white Democrats. Right. Because they didn't want to create this environment where there could be a suggestion that there were white people who didn't agree with the status quo. Yeah. And so they've been pretty insidious in that. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, now we're 2 cycles in. This is going to be the 3rd gerrymander. Now we don't have the VRA. We just have to be more creative. I like hearing you say that. I like hearing you say you're optimistic. One of the things that people probably wonder, how does a guy like Robert Johnson stay in this fight over these years with so many disappointing setbacks, having to deal with so many characters who are frustrating and who are acting with bad intent. And then you have these Supreme Court rulings that kind of turn back progress, that are changing the
face of things and making it easier for Republicans to manipulate the lines. How do you stay in it? And I heard you say a moment ago, I've chosen to be optimistic. I mean, that's kind of what you have to do.
I've chosen to be optimistic, but I continue to fight and strive for a lot of things. But one of them is, as an African American, and I don't know if enough people talk about this, but as an African American or as a Mississippian, the thing that I value the most, that I really have strived for, is self-determination. I want at some point to be in a position, I will be finished when I get to a point the community I represent are able to call their own shots. And I don't know if people understand what I mean by that. In serving in the legislature, everything I've tried to do, and this is not everybody's experience, without talking about race, everybody's experience is not they have to go and ask somebody, can we do this? Ask somebody, can I get some more money for this institution that I represent? Can I? Will you? May I? I'm still striving to get out of that mode. It used to be I was a Democrat I could go to. I'm always with my hat in my hand. I want to get to a point where I don't have my hat in my hand. I want to get to a point where somebody that I'm close to, myself or somebody that I trust and I'm close to, is calling the shots. So, yeah, why do I still do it? Because I still don't have self-determination.
And that's the way it should be, right? I mean, at the end of the day, what we care about and what I think you and I are fighting for is for the people to own their government.
Yes.
That's the way it should be. It shouldn't be a handful of people.
It.
It shouldn't be a few people here and there. It shouldn't be a few guys that can manipulate the maps to work their way. It needs to be the people's government. They need to be the ones that are calling the shots.
On a personal level, I can sit down. I like Teddy Reeves, Delbert Hoes, Jason. I like all of them. Just personally, they're easy people to like. But every one of them have said things like, well, I just don't think that's what we ought to do. Or I don't like that. Or this is what I believe we ought to do. Well, hell, you just one person.
Yeah.
But you're the same one person that's been telling me that the whole time I've been elected. Either you or somebody just like you. And at some point, I want to be able to say to you, well, I don't like it.
And that have some weight.
Yeah. I don't like it. Let's see how it feels for me to tell you I don't like it.
Well, I hope this podcast gets popular enough that the things you say on it can get you in trouble. That's my goal.
Yeah.
So
well,
it's big enough. So
fortune honors the brave or the bold.
Well, let's talk more about your friends. Mississippi Today reported that a typo in a House bill is going to keep $15 million from going into the Strengthen Mississippi Homes program. Now, this is a program that offers $10,000 to homeowners who try to build reinforced roofs that are strong enough to survive hurricane winds. The House bill said that release of these funds was contingent on the passage of Senate Bill 2406. But what they meant to say was that it was contingent on Senate Bill 2409. So when 2406 died, the funding was killed for this year.
Yeah.
Now, this comes after the Senate made an error just last year when they passed the biggest income tax reduction bill in the history of the state. It was a bill that said 0.85% when they meant 85%.
Yeah.
And this mistake means that the state's income tax repeal will go into effect much sooner than expected, a difference of millions.
Much sooner than we can stand for it to go.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's unbelievable. Put it on hyperdrive.
As draconian as the bill was, even the people who wrote it didn't want it to go into effect that fast.
That's right. So listen, that's two mistakes just in 1 year. 1 calendar year, costing the state of Mississippi millions of dollars, a really huge one, and then this little old $16 million mistake. Now, Robert, during my time in politics, I think if Democrats had accidentally sent $50 to a middle school in the Delta, that's all these people would be talking about. Here they have made two mistakes that are huge. And this isn't even all the mistakes. There are others. But we're talking about a legislature that is doing this almost on a routine basis now, missing a decimal point, putting the wrong number in. One of them will leave early while the other one's still going, forcing them to pass a bill that they need the court to correct or the governor to veto. It's a mistake factory. Is it incompetence? Is it a product of what we were talking about a minute ago, where, you just got the lowest common denominator making major decisions for a state in 2026? Or what are we looking at?
It's some of that, but most of it is what we objected to during the special session. You have a 240-page bill. You call us in here on a Tuesday to be here on Wednesday. Give us a bill. No, you don't. You don't give us a bill at 3 o'clock. because it's not ready. Then the next morning, people get a chance to see the bill, and you want everybody to vote on it without it being vetted and talked about. That's not legislation. These mistakes happen because everybody, the people who are in leadership, they got so much power, they just intend to have their way. So they don't feel a need to sit down and debate bills, vet issues, go back and forth, have somebody like Robert Johnson look at it. Why? Because he'll find something wrong with it. Yes. It may be something you want me to find what's wrong with it. But more importantly, that's what legislation is. Everybody sitting down doing their job. Somebody would have caught that. Somebody would say, wait a minute. That's not the bill we were talking about. But this whole rushing, you don't need to look at it. People think that watching the legislature, people always say, oh, thank you for fighting back. I'm not fighting because I disagree. I didn't disagree with you court reform. What I disagree with is having me vote on something that's going to have that kind of an impact on young people without having an opportunity to look at it and make sure you got it all right.
Yeah.
When I got judges and prosecutors and people calling me and saying, look, all of this looks good, but this is bad. You need to fix this before it goes in. And nobody wants to hear that. They just, we got it. We're going to send it through. And I guarantee you, the youth court bill, full of mistakes. I guarantee you the policies, they're going to find out. We're going to be back here in less than a year in January, and we're going to be looking at it and say, well, there was something we did in there we think we need to fix. That we didn't need to do that. We need to get it. Why? Yeah. Because you won't sit down with 122 members of the legislature in the House, 52 members of the Senate, put everybody's heads in there together, those who are willing to do it, and look at it and make sure we got this right. Nobody wants to do that anymore. And I'm telling you, when you were elected, I can remember watching you. We'd be adjourned. You sitting at your desk going through legislation.
I thought you had to read.
Yes.
I thought you had to read the.
No, that's what.
Apparently, I was wrong.
Well, so you make a $15 million mistake. You make a $500 million mistake when you don't let everybody read, or you don't give everybody who's willing the time to read.
It belies, too, this thing I've heard my whole life out of Republicans, which is give us control, you'll get orderly government. You'll get efficiency. You'll get a better streamlined system. You know, our way of doing things is more orderly. Now, a lot of that is steeped in racist rhetoric and the way that they've held control over the South for so long. But a lot of it is this idea that somehow we're just more organized, more efficient. You'll get a little bit of cleaner. You won't have all this trouble to deal with the Democrats who are always, wilding out on something.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing is the exact opposite. Mississippi is not getting a good product.
No.
Republicans control every part of this thing, and they are making major mistakes almost by the day. Unfortunately, it comes at a time when the American media has been deteriorated and the local press has been deteriorated to such a point that there are a lot of people who are probably listening to this podcast who don't even know some of this stuff, who don't know that we are seeing $1 million gaffes by the session, by the quarter. So we're not getting what they sold.
Look. It is more streamlined. It's also more screwed up, too, because nobody is, one or two people looking at 300 pages is not how you get it done. I keep talking about Republicans like that. I don't know what.
Well, they own the whole thing.
They run everything. I got to talk about them. Because
I'd love to talk about the Democrats in power.
Oh, yeah.
They
run everything.
Stuff.
So they meet every week during the legislature, and they talk about what they're going to do, and they make decisions in 74, 75 of them in a room, and they come out and they're ready to go. And I ask them, so what are we doing? Republicans talk to me. We talk all the time. What are we doing? And I promise you, at least 50% of them that talk to me say, I don't know. I said, I thought you all worked on it. I don't know. I said, well, did you see this in the bill? Where did you get that from? I said, I got a copy of the bill. I just looked at it. Well, they didn't give us a copy of the bill. They just told us this is what we're going to do. And they're beginning to complain about it more because they have to answer, just like I do, for these mistakes that we make. This is the most frustrating thing that people say. I've been working on this for 4 years.
Yeah, that's
well, damn it, I hadn't even seen it for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Everybody says that. All the leadership says how long they've been working on things, but the first time I've heard about it was today.
Yeah. I think that might be disingenuous, Robert.
I think it might be a little bit.
You of belief.
I think it just might be a little bit.
I don't think anybody's toting around their notebook, right, working on a bill.
One of those chairmen says he's been working on something for 4 years, and $80 million or over $200 million ends up in this small county.
But, at the end of the day, the people of Mississippi are getting sold a bill of goods. What I would like to see is voters. I've lost confidence in politicians writing their own ship. But what I would like to see is voters decide that they want more out of their government. You told us that if you made us in charge of everything, you would get a better product. You're getting a bad product. You need to invoke the lemon law. You need to rethink your political choices, and you need to reevaluate, is this what you want your state to be? You're talking about a state with enormous challenges, a state that really struggles to do basic things on a basic level. And now you have leadership that is a runaway chaos factory that's costing you money, that just brought you back in for a $300,000 special session you didn't have to have, and that you only had because people couldn't handle their emotions like adults.
Right.
And that doesn't even touch these $1 million problems we're talking about.
Right.
So I hope that people will give some thought to that, because we've talked about confidence in the voters. I actually do have confidence in the voters, but they're going to have to pay attention.
Look, I want to say to Democrats and Republicans, I'm saying to Republicans, I'm saying to Democrats, stop voting for somebody because they're a Democrat. Stop voting for somebody just because they're Republican. If you're going to just vote for them because they're Republicans, vote for better Republicans. If you're going to vote for somebody because they're Democrat, vote for better Democrats. But the only way you're going to know they're better is that you have to read, pay attention to what they're doing, look at the product. If the product isn't any good, you need to change. People keep saying we need term limits. People get entrenched. They're only entrenched because you allow them to be.
Yeah, vote them out.
Kick them out.
Right. That's right.
Let's get a product. But you're right. When Tate Reeves ran against Brandon Presley, he was unpopular because he hadn't done a good job. The state was in bad shape. Hospitals are still closing. People don't have health care. Young people were not staying here. They're either leaving or not coming back when they finish college, because we weren't doing the things that made it attractive. And then you run it against Brandon Presley was a candidate as a public service commissioner, proved that he cared about people, cared about issues, did the work. He operated as a commissioner like a person who's afraid that if he didn't do a good job, he'd go home. People know you're going to vote for him just because they're Republican. Have got to the point, all they got to do is say,
you're going to get what you pay for.
I'm pro-life. I'm anti-transgender. I want immigrants out of it. And think about it.
I'm just against the same stuff you are against.
Right.
And what I can do with the job is...
Think about it, though. Think about all those things I just mentioned. And Republicans that in Mississippi run on that. None of those things are issues in the state of Mississippi. None of them. You know what's an issue? Housing, health care, access to health care, public school infrastructure, underpaid public safety, first responder people, and infrastructure by itself. Just being able to cross a bridge and go back and forth to work.
Yeah.
But people talk about three issues that literally have no impact on the state of Mississippi.
Well, fear-based politics has seized the nation and certainly has loomed large in Mississippi for a long time. I think we've about talked it out today, man. We're hitting our stride. We're getting there.
I've been through 2 shows. My adult kids said, don't talk about women and don't talk about young people because you know nothing about either one of them.
Okay, and now we can stick to that. That's good advice. So look, if you like this episode, please give it a 5-star rating on your podcast app and subscribe. You can also follow us on social media. Y'all Ain't Right. It's produced by Emily Henderson and sponsored by Chisholm Strategies. You can send show ideas or complaints to hello@y'allainkRightPod.com. We'll be back next week with another episode.
Yeah.
That's it.
I'll see you next week.
Yeah, see ya.